continuing with the principle of the flow, is we are going to talk about legalities and protocols. And the next class, you will be getting a couple handouts. One of them is going to be the youth workers form that we use here at Greater Grace. And if you've ever read it, you'll walk around children with your hands behind your back. Hey, don't touch me. But it's really good. It's very thorough because there's a lot of protocols. And part of my job that I hate is when I have to deal with that. Like there's two parts of running an outreach department. One of them is exciting. It's visionary. It's the greatest thing in the world is to. It's almost like you are like spiritually behind people learning, like starting to ride a bike, and when you see guys take off or ladies take off and make a difference in people's lives, and it's exciting, but that only there. And this will be part of helping you answer one of your questions on the exam. Is the legalities and things is we have to be aware of certain things that can kill your ministry in a New York second. And we start out with the principle of the flow because the number one thing is how you treat people. How you treat people that we minister to. Bingo. How do you treat people? And that's when you look at the flow chart. When you look at the flow chart, it's really very delicate. This part baffles my mind, even when I think about it, is when I realize that we can so easily mess up those people. So easily. What if I was teaching an untruth in outreach? Now, answer me this question. Now, I want to present this in an orderly fashion. So let me do this. Okay. Now, in the church, that number one square is the most important position. It's the pastor-teacher. Now, are we supposed to reverence the pastor-teacher? What should be our attitude towards our pastor-teacher? Respect, love, care. That's the big word. Honor. 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 The office. The office. Because God put them in that place. God put them in that place, right? So we honor that office. I'm going to do this on a smaller scale to make these points. And I'll do This is church. And this is the home front. The home front. And I'm going to be we're going to talk about some raw stuff in this class, okay? Especially when it comes to dealing with legalities and all that kind of stuff. Now we'll put the kids down here because these are children. When we talk about legalities, and we're talking about covering principles. Now let me ask you a question. I'm trying not to go into this whole doctrine on this, but because I believe that you have an understanding of it. But God, what is God's perspective of the pastor teacher as far as the responsibility that he's given him? Now in the Old Testament, could the deacons go inside the temple? Who was the only person that can go? The high priest. The covering for those people. That was a very high responsibility. Now, if he wasn't right, what happened to him? They used to tie a rope. How'd you like to be the person outside? I don't know, it feels a little slack. Oh, okay, we're good. Give it a little tug. Yeah, we're good. He's done. Oh, this ain't good. Right? Now, I'm not going to have you turn there, but David, that's why, see, David was a knucklehead. And here's the thing about, this is the thing about, you in your lifetime are going to be a knucklehead, jerk, stupid, make mistakes, fail, everything, whatever, to whatever degree. Doesn't matter. I mean, if you pick your nose in public, or if you go out to the bar tonight, it doesn't matter. Sin is sin, right? Right? Dirt is dirt. What? Huh? If it ain't, it should be. Right? Right? Okay? Bruce Crevier, this guy, spin the ball guy. It's Bruce Crevier. One of the cutest things he says is like, if I just took a little piece of poop and put it in a brownie mix and made 100 brownies, would you eat any of those brownies? That's sin. You would? Ooh, boy. Okay. So, never judge your effectiveness by your failure or successes in your mind. Okay? But judge it according to your belief in who God is, really. Okay? This is important because this is what happens a lot of times. One of the things that breaks down a flow is when, and this is level 1, we'll call this the second, and then we'll call this the third. Guess what? This guy saw this guy pick his nose. Now, I'm kind of sidebarring here, but this is important. If I saw him pick his nose, does that mean I have the right to take his place? Of course not. That's silly. And this is what happens. What happens a lot is that people see, when people get close or work close with the pastor or the person in charge, like, if you can follow me for 10 days and you can pick me apart, right? You could come out with a newspaper. Well, let me tell you about Pastor Cooper's shortcomings. Like, I can't think of any, but, But what happens is, number one hindrance of a flow is when people in authority or people in leadership see a flaw, a human flaw, in their leader. Now, I'm going somewhere with this. When we talked about the soul, right? Okay. And this gets into, we're getting into legalities. This is all important because it has to do with covering. Okay? Because an important principle and protocol is to always honor authority. Okay? In the home front, let's say me and Mom go on vacation, and Uncle Jimmy comes, and we don't know it, but Uncle Jimmy comes and he beats our kids, right? He abuses our kids, right? Now, same principle, okay? If Uncle Jimmy is beating the kids, is that going to affect the kid's relationship with the father? His trust is going to start to diminish. Do you understand that? Okay. If I'm occupied, this is where Satan works. If Satan gets me occupied with him picking his nose, then what's going to happen? If I see or let's just say this guy just outright fails, right? And I'm in leadership. Could that affect my trust if I see a human side of my pastor? Could it affect my trust? Okay. Now, if that problem exists here, what happens to these people, the congregation? Do they ever really get plugged into the full flow of the ministry? So, if I see a flaw in my brother, what do I have to do here? What's the biblical thing to do? Yeah. I go to him alone, right? If I can't resolve it, I go with somebody else, whatever. But my mission is not to fix this problem. Because there's a third principle here, which is very important, and it's David with Saul, right? Saul's trying to kill David. David's hiding in caves. Then finally David gets the opportunity, cuts off a piece of his skirt, and then what was his conviction? I can't touch God's anointed. God put him in that place. It wasn't his place to discipline him. If the pastor's off, God's going to take care of that. Right? So the very point is this is why protocols and things are so important, because we want to protect the integrity of the church. The integrity of the representation. We have this is the policy for working with kids. It's both sides of the paper. This is it, right? And I'm going to give you a copy next week. of this. I don't want to give you a copy this week because I feel this class is kind of like broken up because of the exam. But here's a simple one. Every parent or guardian will have to give written permission for the child to partake of any food that is handed out by Greater Grace World Outreach or any of its affiliates or workers or representatives of any of its ministries or programs. Don't give any candy or food that potentially could be harmful or cause problems, such as hard candy, candy that's not wrapped, lollipops. Only give soft wrapped candy such as Starburst gums and or pastries. Never give children any money. And only give material objects, toys, as part of a special prize or reward for a program or special event. That's just 2 lines out of this whole thing. But all of these things are very important. Now, I'm going to give you a couple protocols in a few minutes, a couple legal laws in Baltimore and in Baltimore County in a minute. And I'm also going to give you, next week, I'm going to give you a bunch of handouts next week, okay? But this is important. Now, the other thing is important is this. There's 2 words. One is vulnerability. A new soul is the most vulnerable position of soul. And soul, when it comes to Christ, is when a soul is at the most vulnerable position of its life. It's vulnerable. Reason being is because prior to receiving Christ, the soul was just receiving its initiation from the world and just going its course. But now that it's received Christ, all of a sudden it stopped all of this initiation, and because of your representation of Christ, has now put its trust in Christ. But at that moment of salvation, how much does that soul know about Christ? Very little. Now, how much does Satan know about that soul that just received Christ? I like to, by way of illustration, it's kind of like this. You got Satan, right? He's sitting down. He's sitting down on his laptop. He's got his laptop. And Pastor David, this is for you. His laptop plugged into an external hard drive, a 17 terabyte external hard drive, right? And this is the little warning light. This is like the alarm system, and all of a sudden somebody got saved. Now remember how when we went over the soul, and I know I'm not expecting you to remember this verbatim, but remember that your soul, your subconscious mind, is totally aware of everything that you've been through. Okay? Everything. And so is in Satan. He's got it right here on his hard drive. And what happens when a soul gets saved? See, before salvation, you were in the system, but you were in an issue. But now that you're saved, all of a sudden you become a threat to the enemy. And the alarm goes off in hell, and Satan immediately dispatches demons to try to hinder that new believer. That's why, and Pastor Jason is going to do a segment of this class, part of it, maybe 1 or 2 hours on inReach. That's why follow-up, like when we talk about outreach, we're not just talking about getting people saved, but we're talking about getting people saved and plugged in to a local church. Now, The job of the soul winner, no matter what position, me, outreach director, doesn't matter. The job of the soul winner is to bring the soul under the covering of the flow of a pastor teacher. So I'm not trying to save souls unto myself. I'm trying to plug them into a pastor teacher who is going to shepherd them. Now, simple thing is this. If I am in this position, number one, unless I'm a bonehead, I will only be in this position if this person is teaching truth and shepherding me. For example, two things. One is I couldn't teach. It's not my responsibility to. It's not my responsibility to give the church the vision for the lost. It's the pastor's responsibility. If our pastor didn't go ahead of me, then as a disciple, I couldn't really follow him. See? But I'm under a pastor that goes. I'm under a pastor that I can learn from in this area. So then I can bring other people under that, and we're all going somewhere. But here's the other thing that I want you to think about, and this is legalities and protocols, is let's take this guy over here. He's the head usher. Now, here's another evidence of vulnerability. If the head usher goes to this guy who's new in the church and says, "Excuse me, sir, I need you to move your seat. If you mind, could you move your seat over there?" How fast would that person move? Person, no problem. Then that usher could come to him again and say, "You know what? I didn't mean to put you there. Can I put you over here?" I bet you that guy would move at least 3 or 4 times before he questioned that usher. Because when you walk into a church, do you remember your first time? Everybody that you see is more spiritual than you in your own mind. And if some guy with a suit comes to me and says, "Excuse me, sir, I need you," I'm thinking, you must be a pastor or somebody, right? Do you understand that? That's a vulnerability of a new soul. That's why covering a new person, covering a soul, and having things in order is so important. It's so important. Okay. Now, let's look at this part. If you would turn, just 2 verses we're going to read in Galatians chapter 2 and then 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Just 2 verses. And with those verses, we are going to go back to one more. No, come on, go up. One more. There. Your whole ministry, you don't want to lord over people. You want to lead people. You want to minister to people. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 3, if a man thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. There should be a part B. He also deceives those people that trust him. If a person receives Christ and comes to church with you, are they trusting you? Yes. Okay. 1 Corinthians 8, verse 2. If any man think that he knows anything, he knows nothing, as yet he ought to know. That leadership is always approached in humility. In humility. We are to cover people. In that covering should create in them a capacity. Because this is what, I need to use this. As outreach people, you are becoming the managers, the district manager of man's volition. Yes, dear. Volition? It means your free will. Your free will. This is what gives God glory. God gets glory when somebody gets a glimpse of Him and responds to Him. That's glory. Making you say a prayer is not glory. Like, I was at one event once, and this guy was a pastor too, and he was like, there was a camera team there. He was like, the cameraman, I know it's your time. You need to receive Christ. God's like, yeah, thanks, I don't think I'm ready. And he was on him and on him and on him until he said the prayer. Oh, you know, he was just on him until he said the prayer. And I talked to the guy after. I was like, man, that prayer didn't mean nothing. It's like, if your heart's open, you know, the time will happen. But it's like, that's just not it. This is it. Is while we are developing a program that's going to lead and minister to people, we are serving them. And we are giving them a platform in order to get closer to Christ. And we are the platform. And we're going to serve them. My hands and knees. Serve them. Not lord over them, do this, do that, because that's not free volition. Has God ever woken you up in the night and told you to do something? If He has, how has He spoken to you? Now, I've had the Lord speak to me in my heart. But it wasn't like, hey, Kevin, you jerk. What are you doing that for? Do this. Right? Or if you ever made a mistake and have God wake you up and slap you in the face. You know? No, it's the Holy Spirit. The Lord leads us. And we choose Christ. We choose. When you hear a message, you choose to receive the word. Right? So we are to teach people how to use the volition to choose Christ. Now, I'm supposed to be talking about legalities. And I think I'm just going to skate it and really get into it on the next class because I want to do it and give you the stuff, but it's a lot of stuff to look at. Now, we read those two verses. Every outreach leader or every leader needs to be operating under a pastor, under a spiritual covering, because that's God's order. You know, it's just God's order. It's God's gift to the church as a pastor teacher. A lot of times people get into ministry and they think because they learn a couple verses that they're experts. Oh, I can handle this problem. You know, we'll be talking about this in future classes, but in the area of substance abuse, the church is like number 2 in the list of enablers. People that get in the way of people getting the help that they really need. Because hey, I'm spiritual. I'll give you 3 verses. Read it 6 times. No problem. I'm going to be giving you resources. I'm just showing you this for now. Anybody know who James Dobson is? Who knows who James Dobson is? We're going to be talking about, we're going to get into developing programs for children, teenagers. Well, not so much teenagers, we'll refer to Pastor Love, but also different adults and different type of outreaches. But anybody that works with kids that doesn't read Dobson, it's like we don't know everything we need to know. Just because you know a few verses doesn't mean that you know everything about life that you need to know. You utilize the resources that are available to you to learn these things. There's many resources also about, I'm giving you this. There's doctrine booklets that we have here about different subjects. And I actually have enough of these in my office to give to everybody. But I just brought a handful tonight. What is that? What does that say? What's the title? It says An Interview with Death. This was written in 1986, I believe. I'm sorry. 1986.
Thank you.
You should know by heart. If you didn't get one, I'll give it to you next class. I'll bring more next class. But that's An Interview with Death. And if you know anything about a doctrine book, they are categories. They deal with categories, specific categories in the Bible. That deals with death. There's a lot of principles about death. And actually, I might have someone come in here who is really good about talking about hospice, who when they were in Bible college, he had the most incredible hospital and hospice outreach that we've ever had here. Hang on a second. Here we go. It's getting hot. Or maybe I should turn it up and we'll talk about people going to hell. Okay. Okay. Now, do I want to talk? Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can get this for you. Okay. Covering people is very important because we can easily offend somebody, and in doing like something simple, like putting a track in a person's door, right? A protocol is not to do it, and I'm just skimming. I know I'm not really getting into all the protocols like in order, because like I said, it's like, with the exam, I don't feel like I have enough time to really teach what I want to teach. So we'll get into it next class. But I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that we do in my office is we receive all the complaints. And the last thing a church wants to do is to represent any area of mistrust. But anyway, let me see if I can play this for you. Can you hear?
Made a valid request, I believe. Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, hi, praise the Lord. I live in a 4300 block of Nicholas Avenue, and you had your people to come out and put advertisements, a ticket, and whatever in people's doors. I'm going to ask, and ask that you be respectful. The Lord says that we do things in decency and in order. To be respectful, because they shoved it in between the seal of my door. Now, I just bought this door, and this door was $1,500, and I don't need anybody shoving anything in the side of the seal to break that seal. So I'm going to please ask in the name of the Lord that you all will please be respectful, and when you're leaving these flyers and these advertisements, that you not stick them in the door frames of people's doors, okay? I appreciate that, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Can you hear that clearly? I tell you what, that's one of the nicest ones I've heard. But she was irritated. She was a Christian, right? And what happens? This is what happens. Is like, you look at a woman and say, oh, that's this lady. She's, she had a bad day at work. That don't matter. Because you know what? The next time that chain pulls up into that neighborhood, she's watching for him. She's watching for him. And just like if the flow gets hindered in the administration before the congregation gets to it, we can hinder the flow out in the street. Because that lady's not thinking that we're coming and she's not looking for the message from us. Matter of fact, she's looking for $1,500 and a new door. But a simple protocol is that we don't leave things. Well, it's an ordinance in Baltimore City. Baltimore City, it's illegal to leave anything on somebody's door. You're allowed to leave, I think a business or organization is allowed to leave 2 things per year. And it's written down. I'm going to hand you the ordinance next week, or next class. But that's a simple protocol. It's like a little thing like that. You're like, what are you talking about? Don't leave a thing at the door. That's nothing. It can turn into something big. And then in that neighborhood, it's kind of like, did those people stick something in your door? Yeah, who were those people? I don't know, but I'm going to call them. Now all of a sudden the whole block is like, there's a negative connotation about the church coming to that neighborhood. And that happens so much. Because getting back to the first point, we don't represent ourselves. We represent God. And we represent the church that's supposed to represent God. Right? And so we need to behave, respect all the ordinances accordingly that we'll get into. And I'll give you a list of a lot of rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, and some legal positions. All right? I'm going to finish this up in just a couple minutes, and then you take a break, and then you'll come back and do your big old exam. And once you get that done, you can study for your next exam. And you can do that here. You can do that over there. You can do it anywhere. All right? I'll make myself available to you for a few minutes, in case you have a question. Now, I'm going to give you information next class on this group too. It's called the Barna Group, and the Barna Group is a Christian organization, and they do surveys. Like if you hear it said, well, 50% of Christians or marriages end up in divorce. These are some of the people that go out and get these statistics, and they get these statistics by interviewing people. And I'm going to give you just an example of one of their surveys. They surveyed saved people and unsaved people. And the question was, what is your perception of the modern day Christian? And 91% of unsaved people said that they're judgmental, and 85% said that all Christians are hypocrite. Now here's the thing. Christians interviewed said that 80% said that all Christians are judgmental. 52% said that all Christians are hypocrites. Christians said that about Christians. And now, why is these things interesting? Because 78% of people said that Christians are old-fashioned. 75% said they're too political. 72% said they're non-realistic. And here's the biggie. 70% said that Christians are insensitive. Now, that sounds like the opposite of what we're trying to do in bringing the message. And you think about that. Why is it they think like that? 64% say that they're not accepting of others. And 61% say they're confusing. And 30% of Christians say that Christians are non-realistic. And 28% say that Christians are insensitive. But here's one of the issues that they when they say Christians are hypocrite, they say that Christians, they protest against gay and lesbian stuff, but they say nothing about fornication or adultery. Matter of fact, there are churches in Baltimore that it's common for people to live together out of wedlock and be an active part of the church and even be in leadership. These things aren't taught that much. But if you think about it, they say, well, what's the difference between a person who's gay, that's a sexual sin, and a person who's cheating on their wife? It's like, how can you make a big deal about one but not the other? See? And so anyway, it's interesting. So I'm going to give you that information next class too, and we'll look at some of that stuff in the future. But the Barna Group, it's a really good resource for you. But these resources are things that will help equip you, like Dobson, helping understand children, if you're ministering to children. The Barna Group, helping you to understand the perception that people have for Christians. Like, what does a person think when I'm going out to do outreach? What's that person thinking in his mind? Well, if I have a little bit of understanding of what they're thinking, then it helps me to, maybe I'll learn to be a little bit more sensitive when I'm sold, and not worried about being like super Christian and I'm going to just be aggressive and make them listen to me, but I'm going to be sensitive and allow the Holy Spirit to minister. So, okay, any questions? Do you have any questions? Okay. All right, so you can take a break, come back at 10 after 8, and then I will give you your exam. So if you come back sooner, I'll give you your exam whenever you want it. All right?